Hello, folks, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Spinner of Yarns, where we read you stories out loud by authors that are looking to promote their works. We're building up to that, but as of yet, I will be reading you some of my works, and we will be continuing with my book, Blood of the Wolf, which you can find on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle edition. You can also find it on BarnesandNoble.com. If you'd like to support what I'm doing here, you can check the description down below or the bar at the top of the channel, and that will give you links to my author page and my Etsy, Redbubble, eBay as well. That is how I support my daughter and support the writing. So please do go check those out. Also, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell and like this video. And, be notified whenever another one gets uploaded. So, without further ado, let's get on with this. On to Chapter 9, The Pack. News spread fast about the battle on the square. Criminals stayed hidden, although they didn't leave the state, but crime had dropped dramatically because no one knew when the Shadow Wolves would be watching. The government had put the Shadow Wolves on their list of most dangerous mutants, and had posted a reward for any information leading to their apprehension. The police had their own hotline available to help in the hunt. Seeing everything that was going on, Arthur decided it was time to talk to Michael about expanding their forces. He found Michael down in the lab hovering over a microscope. "What are you doing?" He looked up from his work to see Arthur entering the room. "Looking at a strain of cancer I've been working on to find a cure." Arthur cocked his head to the side. "Since when do you know so much about medicine?" "It's all part of the training I received while I was gone in the spirit world. I learned all about my people's technology and science. You'd be amazed just how advanced they are." Arthur shrugged. "Well, given what I've seen so far, I can't say much would surprise me anymore." Michael laughed a little. "So what can I help you with?" Arthur remembered what he came in there for as he motioned out the door towards the stairs. "I was watching the news and listening to the bee's nest we stirred up with our display in Pioneer Square. I was thinking that if we're going to continue down this path, then we're going to need to increase our forces." Michael nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing. So what'd you have in mind? That's your department." Arthur smiled at being trusted with so much responsibility. "I was thinking about approaching some of the vets and wounded warriors I know. There are plenty of soldiers out there that feel like they got a raw deal after the war and came home to a worse life than they left." Michael nodded in agreement. "Sounds like a good idea, but I do have to warn you. In the case of men and women that are already mentally broken, this may not be the path they want to take. If their souls are found wanting when they pass through the gate, they will be destroyed." Arthur thought about it and sighed a bit. They're soldiers that need a leader, a purpose. If they don't have that, then for most of them, their life is already over anyway. Michael nodded. "Do what you think's best. I trust you." Michael went back to working on his cancer research as Arthur headed out to do some recruiting. Over the next week, Michael stayed pretty focused on his research until he finally got it. He ran downstairs yelling in excitement, "I did it! I figured it out!" Lisa and Angela were watching TV. Angela muted the television as they both looked over at him. "Figured out what?" Michael ran up to them and gave them both a big hug as he lifted them up off the couch. "I figured out the cure for cancer!" Both of their eyes got wide. "What type of cancer?" Angela asked. "All types. It's just a simple matter of tweaking the formula a little bit once you have the basic equation to work from. It was all sitting right there in my head, and I just had to work it out. All that knowledge my people programmed into me. With enough time, I'll be able to cure all of Earth's illnesses, major or minor." Lisa sighed. "How are you going to cure all the people? You know the government's not going to work with you." Michael nodded. "You're right. They're not going to work with Michael Kerrigan, 18-year-old school graduate. They're not going to work with Bloodfang, brutal leader of the Shadow Wolves. However, they are going to have their hand forced because I'm going to send the formula out to every news station and computer terminal around the world. I'm going to include the message that I will give the governments of the world the chance to be the good guys and distribute the cure to the people willingly and inexpensively, or else I'll destroy the people's faith in their governments and distribute it myself. They're going to hate me, but they're going to listen." Lisa laid her head on his chest and put her arms around him. "I love it when you talk like that. Wake this world up, baby." "So when's this going to happen?" Michael smiled. "Tonight." After a little demonstration, that is. Both Angela and Lisa looked a little worried. Michael just smiled. Don't worry, you'll like this one. Right about 6:30 p.m., Michael called Alan to the intercom and asked him to come to the living room. When he got there, Michael was already in full armor. Alan looked pumped when he saw him. So whose ass are we going to kick tonight? Michael shook his head. Nobody's, hopefully. But go get ready just in case. Alan seemed confused, but he ran to go get prepared nevertheless. When he came back, Arthur was with him, wondering why he wasn't being included. I'm leaving you behind for one very important reason. You have to keep an eye on our new recruits you have been gathering. Arthur raised an eyebrow. I don't have to be near them to know where they are. I can sense their presence just like I can sense the two of you, and just like I know only a third of the 30 recruits made it through the test. Arthur tried to explain the losses, but Michael just raised his hand to stop him. I know the risks, as we all do. And as long as you made them aware, you did your part. We all make our own choices in life. Arthur nodded. So then where are you two off to? Michael smiled. We're off to do something pretty incredible to balance the scales when it comes to the reputation of the Shadow Wolves. I'm taking Alan because I have never tried to channel this much energy before, and if I'm too weak once it's done, I need him to get me back here. Arthur looked very concerned after hearing that. Now I really think I should be going. What the hell are you planning? Michael put a hand on his shoulder as they walked past and headed for the tunnels. Just watch the news. You'll love it. As Bloodfang and Soulfang exited the tunnels, it was still daylight. Soulfang looked around. Think it's such a good idea to be doing whatever it is you're planning in broad daylight? Bloodfang smiled. Absolutely. I have no plans of hiding in the shadows my entire life. The world's going to know we mean business, no matter how they perceive us. But I won't hide like a coward. I'll face the people. Soulfang nodded proudly because in those words, he heard the voice of a leader. He would gladly follow into the pits of hell and back. Bloodfang grabbed onto Soulfang and lifted up into the air, which caught him a little off guard because he had never flown with Bloodfang before. He had never even flown in a plane before, so he wasn't really sure if he was afraid of heights or not. He tried not to look down as he yelled to Bloodfang, Why are we flying? Can't we just teleport to wherever it is we're going? Bloodfang laughed a little. What's wrong? Not afraid I'm going to drop you, are you? Well, it wasn't until now. Thanks a lot, Dick. Bloodfang laughed some more as he flew towards the West Hills, watching the sun moving down towards the horizon. He flew to the highest point of the hospital up on the hill and set Soulfang down on the roof. Soulfang looked around. Why are we at the hospital? Bloodfang smiled. Like I said, we're here to balance the scales. Soulfang looked confused, but Bloodfang just continued to smile. Just watch for security. I don't think they'll be stupid enough to try and confront us, but anything's possible. Soulfang looked even more confused now. Why would they want to confront us? Because I'm about to set off some fireworks. Soulfang nodded as if he understood, but then continued to look confused because he realized he still had no idea what Bloodfang was talking about. Bloodfang flew up into the air about 200 feet above the hospital and began focusing all of his energy and sensing the ley lines that surged through the Portland area. As Soulfang looked up, he could see two ley lines being drawn down towards Bloodfang. His heart started to race at the thought of what he must be doing. As the ley lines intertwined with Bloodfang's own energy, a bright flash could be seen for miles, and the ball of energy that surrounded him was clearly visible now. He continued to focus all of his energy, and as he did, the ball of energy began growing. So large, in fact, that it looked like it might eventually consume the entire hilltop. This caught the attention of local news, police, and military choppers in the area, which caused them to quickly make their way over to see what was going on. Angela, Lisa, and Arthur were all sitting back at home on the edge of their seats as they watched the breaking news that had interrupted almost every channel. The reports spoke of terror in the hearts of the citizens of Portland, and the evacuation efforts that were underway to prevent whatever this mutant may be planning. They knew that what he was planning couldn't be as horrible as they were describing, but given the panic that it was causing, they wondered if it was all worth it. Bloodfang channeled energy for what seemed like an eternity to Soulfang. In reality, it was only about 20 minutes. As the ball of energy began to reach Soulfang, he could sense what his friend was preparing to do. It was nothing short of what would be considered a miracle. Just as the thought entered Soulfang's mind, he heard a rushing of air, and then a loud pop that almost sounded like an explosion. The ball of energy burst out in all directions, sending a wave of bright green energy down the hillside, and continued for over 2 miles. As the wave dissipated, Soulfang could see Bloodfang falling from the sky, and his body was limp. Soulfang quickly leapt from the roof and caught his friend. He erected a force field around them so the impact from the fall wouldn't harm them. Bloodfang was unconscious, so Soulfang picked him up and quickly made use of any shadow he could find to teleport out of the area and make their way back home. Michael had instructed Skywolf to monitor the news, and as soon as his plan was put into effect, Skywolf was to release the cure to all news stations, computers, and governments around the world with a message. What you've just witnessed is a demonstration of what the Shadow Wolves are offering. Reports should soon start coming in about the effects of the energy that just washed over the hospital and surrounding areas. Those reports will tell you that everyone within the radius has been cured and healed of all diseases and ailments. Also included in this message you are hearing now is the cure for all strains of cancer. The formula for this cure is being uploaded into the hard drives of every computer around the world, so I urge all governments to do the right thing and distribute this cure in a timely fashion to the people at a reasonable price. If you do not, then we will destroy your people's faith in you and distribute the cure ourselves. We will no longer stand by and play witness to the crime and corruption within our governments and on our streets. We are offering you a chance to work hand in hand towards a better future for all, to usher in your own demise. The choice is yours. It was 9 p.m. by the time they made it back home, and Michael was finally awake. Lisa, Angela, and Arthur came running up to them to make sure they were okay. Lisa threw her arms around Michael, happy to see he was all right. When we saw you drop out of the sky and Alan jump off the roof to catch you, we didn't know what to think. Michael smiled as he hugged Lisa and threw an arm around his mom as well. So what do you guys think now? Arthur spoke up out of excitement. That was fucking incredible. You know the governments of the world will never listen, though. Even though what you did was nothing short of a miracle, they'll still have us labeled as terrorists and are doubling their efforts because of trying to turn the people against them, which they are referring to as treason. Michael laughed a little. Yeah, well, I kind of saw that one coming. The government has never been one for being truly humanitarian. I can guarantee their next move will be to make up reports of the horrible disfiguring side effects of the cure to sell the sheeple on their propaganda so they can keep them terrified and loyal. In the coming weeks, reports began to leak out just like Michael had predicted. They described severely debilitating side effects from a cure that the governments of the world were saying was fake and just another attempt by the nefarious terrorist organization called the Shadow Wolves to harm the people and further their cause. However, for every report the government put out, 3 more popped up in their place from home chemists and respected doctors that had taken a chance and distributed the cure with miraculous results. This chance, of course, cost them everything when government officials caught wind of their actions and brought them up on preposterous charges, all to quell the growing tide of people that were no longer falling for their lies. The new batch of recruits were ready to begin their training, and more were being brought in each week. Michael had Socrates and the other techs begin working on a state-of-the-art below-ground barracks to house all the new members of the Shadow Wolves. Within a few months, their ranks had grown to 50 members, and the losses from the tests began to drop once Arthur and Alan began to understand better what they were looking for in prospective recruits. Some of these recruits began to excel very well and prove themselves worthy to possibly even serve as part of Michael's elite guard, along with Arthur and Alan. So Arthur arranged an inspection for Michael to examine them. As Michael approached the line of recruits for his elite guard, he saw that Arthur had picked 3 for his assessment, 2 with obvious interesting side effects. The first was an 8-foot-tall mountain of a man named Terrence Murphy. The gene serum had caused his skin to turn black as night and his eyes to glow white from the focused psychic energy Michael could sense coursing through him. Michael looked up at the massive behemoth with a bit of a smirk. So were you always this dark? Visibly a bit irritated as he was still adjusting to the change his body underwent, Terrence just continued to look forward and grumble before responding, No, sir. This was a side effect of the serum, sir. Michael could see he had struck a nerve with the big man, so he tried to contain himself as he continued on with the business at hand. So what sets you apart from the rest that should make me consider you as part of my elite guard? Terrence focused and produced a kinetic shield in one hand and a kinetic hammer in the other. When he swung the hammer, he hit the ground with such a force that it sent a shockwave rippling Forward 20 feet. Michael nodded. Impressive. Terrence smiled. Damn right it's impressive. Michael smirked. Don't let it go to your head. There's always someone bigger and badder waiting to take you down, and brute strength won't win that fight. Terrence nodded, but Michael could tell he would need time to learn that lesson. Before he moved on, he looked back at Terrence one last time. From now on in the field, your name's Shade. Because you show our enemies you're one bit of shade they can't relax in. Terrence smiled again. Hell yeah. Next in line was Raina Benson, a slender beauty with jet black eyes and hair. Michael smiled as he stood in front of her. Interesting side effect, but it somehow suits you. So, show me what you can do. She too had an adaptation of Michael's psionic abilities. Raina formed Shadow with a kinetic field into two dual swords, and she wielded them with outstanding skill as she demonstrated a variety of sword and martial arts techniques. She finished off by slicing clean through a nearby pillar. I haven't found anything they can't cut through yet, sir. Michael smiled and nodded. Very impressive. We'll call you Onyx. Eyes as black as night. Michael stopped mid-sentence and raised a large chunk of the pillar with telekinesis, then hurled it at the back of Raina's head. Without even thinking, she easily moved out of the way of the incoming attack. Michael smiled again. I knew I sensed something else in there. Terrence rushed over to Raina. Did you know you could do that? She looked a little shaken. No, I just felt it coming before it hit. Ah, you son of a bitch! Terrence rushed at Michael, but he never even turned to greet his attack. He heard the energy from Terrence's hammer, and as he started to swing the hammer down, Michael stepped to the side and shifted his weight, then delivered an elbow to Terrence's gut that even made Arthur cringe. Terrence flew back 25 feet and cracked the wall he impacted against. Michael looked back over his shoulder to see Terrence holding his stomach and gasping for air. He shadow teleported right in front of him, grabbed him by the throat, and flew straight up, pinning him to the ceiling by the neck. He got face to face with him so he could make his point perfectly clear. That piece of pillar never would have impacted. I knew exactly what she could do, but she needed to know. I need every one of you at the top of your game, which means I have to push your limits. Now, if you ever attack me from behind again like a hot-headed coward, then this lesson in humility will pale in comparison to the ass-beating you will receive. Do I make myself clear? Terrence barely squeaked out a response. Yes, sir. Michael released him and let him fall to the ground, which wasn't very far of a fall for that big guy. Now get back in line. Terrence scrambled to his feet and returned to the line. Michael floated back down to the ground right in front of them. I will not tolerate insubordination of any kind. What I do to make sure you know, as well as I do, what you are capable of. I not only need you to trust me, I need you to trust yourselves, and to do that sometimes, I have to push you to your limits. But I will never intentionally harm you or your comrades. Michael smiled. At least no more than you can easily heal from. Is that clear? Everyone quickly stood at attention. Sir, yes, sir! Michael nodded as he moved down the line to the last recruit for the elite guard. This one was a 60-year-old vet named Larry McDonald, that now looked to be in his 30s after the gene serum. So what's your story, and why do you keep winking at me? Larry laughed. Still getting used to the new eye, sir. Arthur stepped forward. Larry's a seasoned vet that lost his eye in combat. He's highly decorated and very resourceful. No strange side effects, just one hell of a soldier. Michael nodded. Good, we need good soldiers. He looked back at Larry, who kept winking and smiling each time like a kid with a new toy. We'll call him Eyeball. Larry smiled. I like it, sir. Michael shook his head. I'll bet you do. Michael turned to walk away, but Larry had one more question. Sir. Michael turned back to address him. Yes? I was noticing that this gene serum made me look and feel years younger. Is that normal, sir? Michael nodded. Yes. Even on the day you do pass on, you won't look to be any more than 50. And how long will we live if you don't mind me asking, sir? If you don't die in battle, 300 to 500 years. Everyone's jaws dropped, including Arthur, who never thought to ask. Michael smiled as he turned and walked away, leaving everyone to ponder their new longevity. After training had concluded on the first group of recruits, Michael began sending out units to patrol the streets, stop crime, and report any suspicious activity that was out of the norm. Everything went relatively smooth for the first few weeks until the mafia and gangs began to get brave and decided to bring in outside help. In a show of strength and to try to save face, they gathered in Pioneer Square once again with a group of hired mutants to try and take back what they felt was still their territory. The Shadow Wolves reported in and let Michael know what they were seeing just as Skywolf alerted him to the news reports coming in about it. Mafia and gang members were rallying around 6 mutants, and the police were helpless to stop them. These mutants were wiping out any police and SWAT that tried to approach the scene along with their vehicles. National Guard was en route, but all was seeming hopeless, and to top it all off, they were holding members of the media hostage and demanding the Shadow Wolves come out and fight. Michael smiled and shook his head. Well, if it's a fight that they want. He looked around at the other members of his elite guard that were running into the room after hearing the reports. Suit up! Unanimously, they all yelled, Hell yeah! For the wolf! As they approached the square, Bloodfang perched on top of a building overlooking the scene. Even the National Guard was having a hard time containing these mutants and had begun to pull back to a safe distance. Choppers and burnout tanks littered the streets. 5 of these mutants were making short work of everything in their path, while the 6th just looked on and laughed. There seemed to be nothing special about the first 5, as they just showed minor abilities like strength, speed, being able to control fire, one that screamed like a banshee, which Bloodfang found highly annoying, and a 5th that was spitting acid and climbing walls. Warclaw came over the radio. Sir, what are your orders? Shadow Wolves, rescue the hostages and take out these minor thugs. We'll handle the mutants. Unanimously over the radio, Bloodfang heard, For the wolf! Warclaw looked around at the rest of the elite guard. Well, you heard him. Let's finish this. Bloodfang watched as the Shadow Wolves and his elite guard engaged the enemy. Warclaw attacked the flaming mutant, and though it scorched him, it proved no match for his clawed gauntlets, which shredded right through it, incurring no damage from the heat. The mutant with super strength was toppled by one swing of Shade's hammer, and the mutant with super speed couldn't land a hit on Onyx no matter how he tried. Onyx cut his legs off at the knees, rendering him harmless. The screaming mutant caught a blade in the throat from Eyeball, and the acid-spitting mutant was knocked out with a thought from Soulfang. He fell 15 stories and landed on his head. However, Bloodfang wasn't watching the Shadow Wolves, even though the onslaught was rather spectacular. He was watching the 6th mutant. There was something different about this one that he didn't like. This one stuck close to the Mafia members, yet it made no move to protect them. It actually seemed to be amused by the carnage. At one point, the mutant looked up in Bloodfang's direction and smiled, as if he had known he was there the whole time. Bloodfang felt an uncontrollable snarl beginning to form at the scent being carried on the air finally struck him. The 6th mutant was no mutant. It was a demon, wearing a skin suit to disguise its true form. The Shadow Wolves made short work of the gang and Mafia members, but as they began to converge on this one that Bloodfang now knew to be a demon, they all froze in their tracks as it laughed an awful guttural laugh that made their skin crawl. They had never encountered anything like this, so it made them pause. The demon yelled for Bloodfang to hear. Are you going to come down and play, or should I chew on your pets for a while? Bloodfang teleported off the rooftop and appeared in front of the Shadow Wolves, staring directly at the demon. He's mine. The Shadow Wolves almost looked relieved. The demon smiled. I've encountered many werewolves in my day, but never any with this unique ability. You have to move through the shadows? It's most intriguing. Bloodfang laughed a little. You're just like any other demon I've ever seen. Ugly as sin, and your disguise sucks. The demon curled its lip. Time to teach you some obedience, dog. The demon began growing taller and larger. As it did, its skin suit began stretching and tearing, revealing dark red skin, black clawed hands and feet. It had horns covering its head and black soulless eyes. Bloodfang curled his nose at the stench coming off of this thing, and his eyes flared red as he growled with a hunger for the fight. The Shadow Wolves began backing away to give Bloodfang room to maneuver. The demon roared and rushed in, swinging its clawed hand towards Bloodfang. He moved to the outside and wrapped his arm around its forearm, and then delivered a punch to its elbow that landed with an audible crack. The demon roared in pain as it pulled back and clutched its elbow, while it reset itself. The demon smiled. You're a strong one, but no werewolf is any match for our kind. It roared again as it began moving forward with eye-blurring speed. Bloodfang watched him come in And just as it looked like it was going to hit, Bloodfang punched it in the stomach and followed up with a focused telekinetic blast that sent it flying backwards, digging a trench into the brickwork of the square as it landed. Bloodfang teleported right in front of it and delivered another punch to its jaw, which shattered it. With blood streaming from its mouth, it mumbled, "What are you?" Bloodfang unsheathed his katana, which was now glowing brightly with holy energy. "Your kind would know me as a Thunderwolf." As the demon's eyes got wider and it tried to strike out in a desperate attempt to save itself, Bloodfang struck its neck with his blade and removed its head from its body. The demon began melting into the ground, leaving a smoldering crater behind. He looked back over his shoulder to see everyone standing around, watching in amazement, including the other 5 mutants, who were pretty beat down and unable to continue. Bloodfang turned fully around with his eyes still flaring red and electrical energy beginning to radiate around his body as he lifted slightly into the air. "Let all who would do evil remember the name Bloodfang, and the men and women I lead, the Shadow Wolves. If you wish to bring terror and harm to the innocents of this world, we will hunt you down and annihilate you." Bloodfang's speech not only emboldened the Shadow Wolves, but it struck immense fear into the hearts of all watching. A few police and National Guard even pissed themselves. Bloodfang lowered back down to the ground, and the energy around him dimmed, as his eyes did as well. The police and National Guard began picking themselves up as he started walking towards them. They began raising their rifles as he looked over at Soulfang, who followed him. He held a hand up towards the sky, and as he did, Soulfang could see the ley line he was pulling on, so he did the same. Soulfang had never felt the power of the ley lines coursing through him, so he fully understood how it overwhelmed Bloodfang when he tried to focus so much energy. Bloodfang held up a hand towards the police and military, and before they could react, he hit them all with a wave of healing energy, which Soulfang increased in strength to lend support. All of their wounds were healed, even those on the brink of death. As they looked around at each other, astonished to be standing there unharmed, Bloodfang approached a grouping of commanding officers. "We're not your enemies." One of the officers stepped forward. "That remains to be seen. It's hard to take your word for it when you hide behind a mask." Bloodfang sighed. "Good men do what needs to be done. Must sometimes hide their true identities when corruption infects the highest seats of government. You do well to remember those words." The officer began raising his gun as his troops followed his lead. "We still have a job to do, and we'll bring you in. You're a threat to national security. Surrender now." Bloodfang spoke over the radio in the helm, so no one outside could hear him. "Shadow Wolves, return to base." As Bloodfang shook his head in frustration, the Shadow Wolves began teleporting out of the area. Telepathically, he spoke to Soulfang. "Let them sleep on it." Soulfang nodded as they both raised their hands to the crowd and focused on the sleep centers of their brains. Groupings of soldiers and police began collapsing all around them until no one was awake. With that, Bloodfang and his elite guard turned and began teleporting home, hoping that cooler heads would prevail if they just had time to think about it. And that concludes Chapter 9. So, hope you liked what you heard. Please hit the subscribe and notification bell down below, like this video, share it, pass it on to your friends. Trying to build this channel, so encourage them to subscribe as well and check out the storylines. So, thanks again, and we will see you soon. Bye.